for YouTube. So we're preparing to go live via YouTube. Let me record this one here on Zoom as well, because I want to make sure that I'm now keeping copies of all of my shows. So where's that record button? Let me hit that record button here, and then I am ready to go. Okay, record on this computer. Recording in progress. So to the wonderful family who's joined us in the studio on Zoom, please don't go naked, whatever you do. Don't take the phone to the bathroom with you, whatever
I can't
you
take
do.
my clothes off? Oh, come on. I was going to give you an exclusive today. Come on.
Well, you know, fam, you're gonna have to tune in another time for that. Not on this
Yeah,
show.
you don't want to see none of that. You really don't. That's how you get canceled. You want your YouTube down there, let me take my clothes off. That'll do it.
Yes, so remember, you are live on the Sister Shanice Show. So welcome to everybody that's joined us in Zoom. Welcome to everyone who's joining us via YouTube Live. 100 apologies again to everybody that tried to tune in to the Sister Shanice Show last Wednesday, and I wasn't there because YouTube, in their so-called wisdom, decided that they were going to censor a number of my videos, and then also they decided to give me a strike, which meant that I was unable to broadcast on stream live. I was unable to put up any messages to let people know. So my apologies for that. But I am black. I am back.
Yes.
Blacktastic show, and as you can see, we've got our awesome, phenomenal guest, Dr. Rev Philippe Shock Matthews in the house. And let me bring him forward right now and add him to the spotlight. Oh, welcome,
hey, fam.
Dr. Rev. Oh, welcome. And as you can see, we've got, you know, one of our fantastic mentors in the house, Dr. Clyde Winters. Please give us a wave.
Yes,
we love
yes.
you so much, Dr. Clyde. Oh, thank
Couldn't
you
do
for
this
being
without
in
him.
the house. And to everyone else who's joining us live via Zoom, thank you so much. And let's get, I mean, our beautiful brother, Dr. Rev Shock, has got a fantastic presentation lined up for us. So I'm going to be jumping out the way as quickly as possible. But before I do, I must introduce the great man himself. Now, he's not a stranger to the Sister Shanice Show. He's done a number of shows here before. So please do go into my archives, find the shows, download them. I don't know how much longer my shows are going to be up on YouTube for. So please do download all your favorites. We have some great shows on here. But Dr. Rev Philippe Shock, wow, he's an Africano phenomenologist, philosopher, I can't even say that one, and peak performance metaphysical trainer who in the last 35 years, he doesn't look old enough, has personally interviewed over 2,000 thought leaders, change agents, experts, authors, and scholars. Dr. Matthews is a minister of metaphysical science and philosophy and the founding minister of First Frequency of Oneness, Science, Manifestations, and Prosperity. The word shock stands for seeking higher omnipotent conscious or cosmic knowledge. Wow. His master's thesis, can using metaphysical mediation and affirmations daily heal the trauma of generational poverty in African Americans. Wow. And it's one of the most read on academia. Oh, wow. And he is affectionately named by the community as the metaphysical Morpheus because he has a unique ability to shock Black people out of their false racial identities due to dubious, double consciousness and back into the mind of their original first frequency of oneness. Wow. So that gives you an insight, family, of what we're going to be getting today. So
I want to meet this guy. Who is this dude? He sounds great. I'm just Philip, his twin. You know, I don't know about this Philippe guy.
You should. You are great. You've been doing some amazing work. And family, jumping over to one of his most recent papers that has been submitted to academia, entitled "Systemic Racism as a Technology," is what we're going to be going in today, family. And this paper pulls together a huge amount of evidence that there is a psychobiological component to systemic racism. And, I just can't wait for us to get into that. So, Dr. Philippe Schaap, we are delighted. We are honored. We are privileged to have you in our midst. Over to you, my beloved brother.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you, my beloved sister Shanice. Just love you, love your show, love your energy, love what you do for the community. As an FBB, Foundation of Black Britain, you are absolutely awesome and incredible. Shout out to all of the family members that are with us. And we're doing a two-parter, I think. We're going to do one part this week and another part next week because there's so much content. But I've got about 47 slides to go through, so let's get to it. Let me share my sound. Let me find my PowerPoint, my keynote here. I think this is it. You guys, Sister Shanice, let me know if you can see my screen
yes,
that I'm sharing. And can you see full screen right now?
Full screen, yes.
Okay, beautiful. All right, here we go. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. All right, so this presentation is dedicated to my four spiritual mothers and my auntie, the Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman, upper left, who taught me that you are the thinker who thinks the thought that makes the thing. On the far right, top right, Reverend Dr. Helen Carey. Lower left, Reverend Dr. Mary Tumpkin. In the middle, Reverend Dr. Barbara King. And of course, everyone's favorite auntie, Nana Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. Shay, rest in power, my beloved goddesses. Now, I have a research fund that I just launched, and so as a result of what you're about to see and about to witness, it takes a lot of time, a lot of money to do this high-level research. I want to send a shout out to Dr. Clyde Winters. Because of him, I was able to take my research and my work to a completely different level, organize it in the most powerful way. And so I really give honks and thanks to Dr. Winters for teaching me and coaching me and all of us that are in this process. But we wanted to take it to another level and could not have done it without Dr. Clyde Winters. First Frequency of Oneness is the ministry. We help create a spiritual, psychological, and emotional barrier from the hidden signal of racial battle fatigue and racialized domestic terror. We remove Black people from the effects of their false racial identities that we call third and fourth frequency. We help Black people overcome their trauma bond, capture bond, and Stockholm syndrome to whiteness. Additionally, we are a culturally specific teaching ministry exclusively for Black people. We specialize in healing and removing the ancestral, historical, and incarnate trauma within Black people. We also help our people reveal and restore their natural and original first frequency signal or vibration. So First Frequency of Oneness is based on Tep-Heseb science, not self-esteem. And Tep-Heseb is the accurate reckoning by using the correct method. It's the Africana or African process of the scientific method. And again, we're a teaching ministry, not a preaching ministry. Now, who am I? I have a doctorate in metaphysical science and philosophy. I'm the founding member of First Frequency of Oneness, Science, Manifestation, and Prosperity. As Goddess Shanice told us earlier, SHOC stands for Seeking Higher Omnipotent Conscious or Cosmic Knowledge. I'm also the founder of the SHOC Metaphysics Virtual Comedic Wisdom School, former host of the Philippe Matthews Show that now is First Frequency of Oneness, SHOC Metaphysics, authored over 25 plus books or so. And so let's get into first things first as we move forward with this cipher. The invention of white people, the false race of white people were invented as a matter of law in the United States between 1664 and 1681 in response to Bacon's rebellion. This false racial construct placed the African at the bottom of American society and stripped us of all of our rights. There is no biological validity to the false concept of race. white people or whiteness is not biological, it is ideological, having a detrimental generational neurobiological effect on African people in the diaspora. Now, Goddess Barbara Fields, she says that anyone who continues to believe in race as a physical attribute of individuals might as well also believe that Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy are real, and that the earth stands still while the sun moves. So let's get into how white people were invented as a matter of law and what were the laws that created this. The laws were known as anti-miscegenation. Anti-miscegenation or miscegenation laws are the laws that enforce racial segregation at the level of marriage and intimate relationships by criminalizing interracial marriage and sometimes also sex between members of different races. On the far right side, the photo that you see is the actual law of colonial Virginia. I don't think they hadn't produced S yet, so the F you have to transfer when you see the per fawn versus it's supposed to be per son. So, but this is the actual anti-miscegenation law. So if anybody tells you, oh, white people weren't invented as a matter of law, here is the law. And you can go to the, I think it's called the Burgess Archives, which are all of the laws that were written in colonial times that signify the creation and invention of white people. Now, there are three laws that came out of anti-miscegenation that we need to be familiar with, and we need to know like the back of our hands. We need to know that one, the first law was a person of African descent could no longer vote or run for office. Number two, a person of African descent could not own guns or gunpowder. So the black male could not, the African male could no longer protect himself or his family, nor could he feed himself or his family. And so this was the beginning of the black, a person, and this the most insidious, a person of African descent could not take any legal action against this new false racial construct of humanity called white. Now, the genesis of white trash comes from a great researcher, Dr. Eisenberg. She says that their history starts in the 1500s. It derives from British, so this was long before the anti-miscegenation laws. This is the beginning of the consciousness, the concept, the characteristics and traits of whiteness, white trash, and what we today refer to as poor white trash. She says it derives from British colonial policies dedicated to resettling the poor. Decisions that conditioned American notions of class and left a permanent imprint. First known as waste people and later white trash, marginalized Americans were stigmatized for their inability to be productive, to own property, or to produce healthy and upwardly mobile children. The sense of uplift on which the American dream is predicated. Interestingly enough, they did this to their own first before they did this to us, because what you see here is exactly what they have done to us, but they discriminated against their own as a result. And this is the part of American history most people don't understand and don't know. Well into the 20th century, expulsion and even sterilization sounded rational to those who wished to reduce the burden of a loser people on the larger economy. The mid-19th century, when poor rural whites were categorized as somehow less than white, their yellowish skin and diseased and decrepit children marking them as a strange breed apart. The words waste and trash are crucial to any understanding of this powerful and enduring vocabulary. Throughout its history, the United States has always had a class system. It is not only directed by the top 1% and supported by a contented middle class. We no longer ignore the stagnant, expendable bottom layers of society in explaining the national identity. White trash were dangerous outliers in efforts to rebuild the Union during Reconstruction. And in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, when the eugenics movement flourished, they were the class of degenerates targeted for sterilization. So That white trash today, we call them rednecks, hillbillies. We saw them climbing the state capitol. We see them out here, conducting just ridiculous levels of violence, all of your mass shootings or what have you. That's this group, the epigenetics of and the intergenerationality of this particular group. The 1%, of course, is the politicians and the people at the top that have created this false sense of race and have given poor whites access to whiteness, making them feel like they're better than and that they're gifted when they're really not. Dr. Battle teaches us that Irish Catholics in the US were portrayed as anti-American, not full citizens, and were called white Negroes or white N-word. So let's get into the understanding. Now that we have that established, let's get into race technology. Shout out to Yoshi Mod for the graphics and designing the graphics. Yoshi Mod is a one of a kind. There'll never be another Yoshi Mod. I always joke with him. He's out of Houston, so whenever I call him, I say Houston has a problem, and that problem is Yoshi Mod, because he's absolutely amazing with his art, but also with his music that you will experience at the end of this PowerPoint. Now, Thomas Bialosi, during my dissertation, one of my review of Litz was a companion to the anthropology of politics. I found out about race technology when I was interviewing, working with Battle Laura, and there was a anthropologist named Michael Kilman who introduced me to Bialosi's work in race technology. In fact, we did an entire show on race technology. I thought it was so fascinating because what it did was fill in the blanks of how racism is systemic and how racism can be scientifically proven. So he's out of Berkeley. It's chapter 25, and the four aspects of race technology is stating, mixing, classifying, and spacing. And we're going to go into that deep as we go forward right now. Now, stating starts with the Notes of Virginia, Notes on the State of Virginia, 1787 by Thomas Jefferson, where he stated the physical and moral character of African Americans. They secrete more than do whites by the glands of the skin, which gives them a very strong and disagreeable odor. Interesting note that these people that we now call white people, during the Dark Ages and during this time, they were not clean people themselves. In fact, we were just doing a workshop that we do on Friday on breaking the spells of second frequency. This group, they used to wash first of all, many of them never washed their clothes because they didn't have any sanitary water. And the ones that did wash their clothes, the nobles rather, they washed their clothes using urine and ash. So this is the stating aspect of where they're reversing the psychology of projecting their hell onto Black people, onto African Americans. They are more ardent after they're female, but love seems with them to be more an eager desire than a tender, delicate mixture of sentiment and sensation. Their griefs are transient in general. Their existence appears to participate more of sensation than reflection. To this must be ascribed their disposition to sleep when abstracted from their diversions and unemployed in labor. Comparing them by their faculties of memory, reason, and imagination, it appears to me that in memory, they are equal to whites, in reason, much inferior, as I think one could scarcely be found capable of tracing and comprehending the investigations of Euclid, and that in imagination, they are dull, tasteless, and anomalous. I advance it, therefore, that the Blacks, whether originally a distinct race or made distinct by time and circumstances, are inferior to the whites in the endowments both of body and mind. So this part of stating by the president 100 years after white people were invented as a matter of law. Because remember, 1661, 1664, even prior to that, they were already had a prejudice that could be seen and looked upon in the literature. But it wasn't until it became a law, and this law came into place before the Constitution was written and before the first meeting of Congress. So Jefferson and the forefathers were born into the ideology of whiteness. Even though some Blacks had received liberal educations and other exposure to civilization, never could I find a Black had uttered a thought above the level of plain narration, never seen even an elementary trait of painting or sculpture. He concluded, I advance it, therefore, that the Blacks, whether originally a distinct race or made by time and circumstances, are inferior to whites in the endowments of both body and mind. So when we understand that this is the stating, this is the coming from the top, now all whites, this is how they're looking at the Africans that were placed on the bottom after anti-miscegenation. So you can see this was the beginning of white supremacy and how white supremacy began to become what we call a memetical thing, a memeplex. We're going to get into that next week as to what that means. But when you hear the term thoughts are things, a thought becomes a thing when it's transferred from one brain to the next. And the more brains that it can, this idea can infect, then it becomes a thought virus. And that thought virus becomes a thing. And so you have to state it. This is what Black people or Africans are. So that way I am white, I am privileged. Privilege also is short for private law. So I privately have privilege and knowledge over anything that is African, regardless of, you have a PhD, regardless if you're a lawyer, regardless of your academia, this is how you're going to be treated. What is remarkable, Bialosi says, is how little the thrust of white race stating about Blacks has changed since Jefferson's day. While he spoke of racial inferiority, contemporary scholars, the media, and the white imagination loquaciously expound on the Black culture of poverty, the Black family as a tangle of pathology, the Black underclass characterized by skyrocketing rates of crime and illegitimate birth, and all the other Negrophobic images that come seemingly naturally to the white mind: welfare queens, gangsters, drug dealers, and even genetic inferiority. He says, no wonder the Blacks are at the bottom. So that's stating. Let's get into mixing. So we understand now stating. Now let's get into number 2, mixing. The danger, if ex-slaves remain as free men in Virginia, was that mixture might result in staining the blood of whites. Jefferson says that beyond the borders of Virginia, the danger, if ex-slaves remained as freemen in Virginia, was that mixture might result in the staining of the blood of whites in 1787. And there was even more insidious likelihood of this staining that might at first be thought. Since their Black skin and African hair and body form made them less beautiful than whites, Black men came to prefer white women over the females of their own kind, just as the orangutan prefers the Black woman over those of his species. Now, understand that during anti-miscegenation and in response to Bacon's rebellion, there were more planters and more tobacconists than there were women. And so they literally sent over a shipload of women, of European women, which would, of course, turn into be white trash and all of these things that we know today. But what happened when these women got off the boat, they saw these brothers and got jungle fever. Real talk. They ended up marrying many of the slaves and indentured servants over the planters that sequestered them to come over in the first place. So you can begin to see there was a huge jealousy and an inferiority complex of the slaves and of the African man, because the women who saw these beautiful black bodies for the first time, in many ways, ended up with because there were no laws against it. This is why they had to start to create this technological system of mixing. Laws against black-white miscegenation and intermarriage appeared very early in the U.S. In an effort to prevent abominable mixture and spurious issue. Virginia enacted a law in 1691, that's 10 years after white people were invented as a matter of law, which made it a crime for any English or other white man or woman to intermarry with a Negro, mulatto, or Indian man or woman. Virginia singled out miscegenation outside of marriage as a crime distinct from mere fornication in 1662. Now, laws against black-white miscegenation and intermarriage appeared early. Did I repeat this? I think I did. Yep, I repeated that. Thank you so much. Sorry for that. It's only so much sleep I can get. But however, Jefferson, his erudite expositions of the dangers of mixing and staining, he was not able to keep himself from mixing with his own slave, Sally Hemings, and thus staining his own children. Indeed, since the offspring of white men and black slaves, contrary to the precedent of English common law, took the status of the mother and not the father in the United States, the economizing slave owner actually had a financial incentive to impregnate his slaves. You see how that works? Because anti-miscegenation gave white men or European men access to all women, including our women. So while black-white sexual and love relations have historically been the stuff of prohibition, transgressive desire, and pornography, Indian white sexual and love relations have often been and continue to be wholesome white family fare. The marital love between John Smith and Pocahontas and Disney's animated Pocahontas is only the most recent instance of this. A white man finding an Indian or Native American, if you will, woman alluring, and in fact marrying her, has seldom seemed to raise eyebrows. So again, anti-miscegenation gave European men access to all women and negating those women to us. But of course, we understand that the raping of slaves, this is what, you know, Jefferson and all of them did. In Virginia, for example, rape was originally merely aggravated assault, a misdemeanor for either black or white perpetrators. But by 1823, attempted rape of a white woman by a black was punishable by death. So while race-specific provisions were removed from rape statutes after the Civil War, unlicensed terror against black men suspected of rape or attempted rape of whites was prevalent in the form of lynching. One estimate is close to 3,000 lynchings between 1890 and 1950. Legal lynching involved the prosecution, conviction, and sentencing with the vengeance of black men charged with raping white women. Between 1930 and 1967 to 1989, 89% of men executed for rape in the United States were black, over 405 individuals. Mythical statements about black rapists had their primary role in the justification of unlicensed terror against black people in the wake of emancipation. All right, so we've got stating, we've got mixing. Now let's talk about classification, classifying. Bielossi writes that in June 1892, one Homer Plessy bought a first-class railway ticket and boarded a whites-only car in New Orleans, or as the New Orleans call it, N'Orleans. Plessy had some minimal amount of Negro blood and was thus colored under Louisiana law. was in violation of the state's Separate Car Act. And when the train conductor in an arranged confrontation ordered Plessy to vacate the seat and remove himself to the colored accommodations on the train, Plessy refused and was arrested. Plessy challenged the law, and his case eventually reached the U.S. Supreme Court. Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896 is now remembered for having posed the question of whether racial segregation was consistent with the 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal protection for citizens. The court's notorious answer was that yes, separate was constitutional as long as it was equal. What has been forgotten about the case in popular memory is that Plessy's lawyers had launched a direct attack, the very idea of distinct Black and white races, not just an attack on racial segregation. So here's a part of the argument in the Louisiana court. Plessy is of mixed Caucasian and African descent in the proportion of 7/8 Caucasian and 1/8 African blood. The mixture of colored blood is not discernible in him, and he is entitled to every recognition, right, privilege, and immunity secured to citizens of the white race by the Constitution and laws of the United States. He was really a white man classed as a colored man. Plessy's lawyers meant to challenge what is commonly known as the one-drop rule. The one-drop rule as a race-making technique, again, race-making, this is the technology of it, of classification, the effect of producing discrete, mutually exclusive Black and white races in the social and legal imaginaries, As Plessy learned, the race line is literally a line, clear, indelible, and permanent. Dr. Winters talks about this all the time. If slavery and freedom were to be mutually exclusive legal statutes, and if slavery was to be justified by race, something needed to be done, if not practically, then at least conceptually, about miscegenation and racial hybridity. In defense of slavery, the one-drop rule became customary by the 1850s. A person who was obviously of even some Negroid descent riding in a whites-only car would threaten the entire arbitrary system of racial privilege and exclusion. The one-drop rule has also helped to guarantee to whites that they could in no way come to be classified as Blacks, and that was happening, and that what was happening to Blacks, listen to this, what was happening to Blacks could never happen to them because the classificatory boundary was clear to everyone. So these classes and laws is what has shaped US policy and what has brought us to this conversation today and allows us to do the work that we do. Because these cats are so stupid that I don't even know how they came to the I think back, let me go back here for a moment. Where was it? Where it says he was 7/8 Caucasian and 1/8 African. How the hell did they know that? Like, how could they figure that out? They were too stupid to figure that out. So how did they even come up with those numbers? And then they're looking at race just by merely the color of one's skin. So this is a group that is very psychotic, but this is the classification of how, after you have stated what Africans are, you have set policy to make sure that they are not mixing. You are classifying them now so that whites will never feel like a Black person and never have happened to them what has happened to us. So the one-drop rule, in other words, was critical in securing the participation of all whites in white supremacy. All right. So lastly, in the technology of race is spacing. And this is fascinating because racial segregation in the United States was and is all about clearly marking off white space from Black space. Jim Crow involves segregation of all aspects of daily life. Jim Crow laws in the South prohibited Black and white workers from fraternizing on the job, separated the races in hospitals and mental institutions, and segregated inmates in prisons. Separate park laws also appeared, and circuses, tent shows, sideshows, theaters, picture houses, and amateur sports teams were increasingly required to separate the races. Segregation even went so far as Jim Crow Bibles for Negro witnesses in Atlanta courts and Jim Crow elevators for Negro passengers in Atlanta buildings. Beyond classic Jim Crow, segregation, social space, residential segregation has only been and continues to be one of the inescapable facts of Blackness and whiteness in the United States. Critically, residential segregation has been strongest in the North from the early 20th century as African Americans moved north in what is commonly called the Great Migration. The techniques by which residential segregation has been produced have historically included intimidation, terror, and discrimination in housing and home finance markets. We are all familiar with the geography of race produced by these practices, as well as by public policies such as urban renewal. Clearly demarcated lines between largely homogeneous Black neighborhoods and white neighborhoods. The boundary is stark, clear, and every American knows about it and keeps it in the back of their mind so as not to be dangerously out of place. So this is a cat named Richard Rothstein. I interviewed him years and years ago after what happened with Mike Brown and Ferguson. He authored a paper called The Making of Ferguson, and it went back to the laws that created the neighborhood. Remember, I said poverty is not a natural occurrence in nature. Poverty and financial struggle is white man-made. And so these ghettos or hoods that we consider that we talk about, these were socially engineered by policy directly and intentionally. So Richard Rothstein, before he wrote Color of Law, he wrote The Making of Ferguson, which ended up being a chapter in the book, The Color of Law. And I had many interviews with Rothstein on this fact. He says that every metropolitan area in this country has segregation, residential segregation. This residential segregation, most people think it happened by accident or because of white flight or because of private prejudice or because real estate agents were steering people to one place rather than another. But in fact, the neighborhoods in every metropolitan area in this country was segregated by federal policy, deliberate, purposeful federal policy, and by state, local policy as well. We have a government-sponsored system of racial segregation. Rothstein goes on to talk about we've adopted this myth that we have something called de facto segregation. It just sort of happened. Because of white flight or private prejudice, we have segregation by law, by public policy. It was created that way. The policy was persistent throughout the 20th century, and simply passing laws that say you can't discriminate. Watch this. Simply passing laws that say you can't discriminate doesn't undo any of the segregation that existed in the past. It's transferred from generation to generation. Probably one of the most powerful quotes to understand we want our land back, we want our property back, we want reparations. So understand, family, nothing is wrong with Black people. Something happened to Black people. I have a free series on YouTube called nothingiswrongwithblackpeople.com. You can go there, learn these processes, learn these principles, learn this process of what these frequencies are. But then also you will learn then how to reverse engineer whiteness and the trauma that has been embedded into your body. Now, I would like to, if I could, present the world premiere. I don't know if everybody has seen it, but I want all of you to see it here. This is our brother, Yoshimad, his world premiere video. Something happened to Black people. You ain't got time to sit up and go, woe is me, oh, plum disease, my poor little old me. I ain't got time for that shit. I need to get to the promised land.
I'm here to help, trauma stored in the body. My eyes hit me, can you help? They walking around with a head nobody. Created this platform to teach it, bring forth master teaching, and lift our community and banish all the leechers. We ain't a dot or a nickel. Negro never grow. The thinker who thinks the thought, let the masses know. We are the first and maybe the last. One with nature, not a sin against nature. Looking sad. I lost my mom and my dad looking bad, cooking chicken. When it got me a mask, because being broke didn't fit. It's never too late, you part of the greats. Let me rub off on you. Just remember it ain't your fault. I can give you all the tools. Nothing is wrong with Black people. Something happened to Black people. Nothing is wrong with Black people. Something happened to Black people. Africana phenomenologist, comedic scientist, digital with creation, metamorphosis, epigenetics, diginomics, first frequency of oneness, FBA, no religion, I'm a vision. Nothing is wrong with Black people. Something happened to Black people. Nothing is wrong with Black people. Something happened to Black people. Africana phenomenologist, comedic scientist, digital with creation, metamorphosis, epigenetics, diginomics, first frequency of oneness, FBA, no religion, I'm a vision.
What does that look like for you? Are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? Are you tired of complaining about white folks? Are you tired of complaining about Black folks?
I am one with first frequency, one with the first thought idea. I am one with the firstborn people. I am one with the only one. Ashe, and so it is. I am one with first frequency, one with the first thought idea. I am one with the firstborn people. I am one with the only one. Ashe, and so it is. I am one with first frequency, one with the first thought idea. I am one with the firstborn people. I am one with the only one. Ashe, and so it is. I am one with first frequency, one with the first thought idea. I am one with the firstborn people. I am one with the only one. Ashe, and so it is. Nothing is wrong with Black people. Something happened to Black people. Nothing is wrong with Black people. Something happened to Black people. Africana phenomenologist, comedic scientist, digital with creation, metamorphosis, epigenetics, diginomics, first frequency of oneness, FBA, no religion, I'm a vision. Nothing is wrong with Black people. Something happened to Black people. Nothing is wrong with Black people. Something happened to Black people. Rev Shock. Rev Shock. Rev Shock. Rev Shock.
My man, Yoshimad. Oh, you are just amazing, brother.
Wow.
Unbelievable. You know, it's something when you start getting theme music. I'm starting to walk in slow motion now when I get out the car. Thank you for that, Babo Yoshi. So download, go to Spotify or iTunes and download something happened to Black people. We need to make that go viral. We need to use this as a mantra to bring our B1 family together. This is what we're doing. We're research scientists and spiritual scientists, and we're looking. My goal is to reverse engineer this situation and look at what can we do to break out of it. And Dr. Winters, I love his work so much because he is giving us our property back, if you will. He's demonstrating how Black people have been and always have been everywhere, and that we are the first of this land. We are the first of this earth. We're the firstborn of Amma, which is the original sound, tone, or utterance of the divine that we use for the word God. So Amma has done this, and as a result, there's a code that is inside of every African person that has allowed us to sustain this psychological, physiological, and neurobiological injury that we call second frequency. So with that, if you like, we can come to our Patreon for $1 to $5 a month and learn these processes, learn these principles, learn this science. Again, we're not about self-esteem, we're about science. And so science creates the self-esteem, but self-esteem without science is just simple pride and debating and arguing, and that's not what we do. We get it right, we get it accurate, we confirm, we unconfirm. As Dr. Winters has taught us, we are falsificationists, and so we're going back to come forward, but we're bringing in a whole new level of history that most of us don't know about, and unfortunately, most of our scholars don't even talk about, and don't even, and I would assume don't even know. So that being said, recite the affirmation of power, prosperity, and protection 7 times a day, 7 days a week, and let's do it. I am one with first frequency.
I am one with first frequency.
I am one with the first thought idea.
I am one with the first thought idea.
I am one with the firstborn people.
I am one with the firstborn people.
I am one with the only one.
I am one with the only one.
Ashe.
Ashe. Ashe.
And so it is.
And so it is. Awesome.
All right, my family. Thank you for that. Thank you, family.
Wow. We thank you so much, Reverend Shock. Oh my gosh, what a presentation. We knew it was going to be deeply insightful. We knew
Hey, I
it was
see
going
Cheryl.
to be. Yeah, rise up, rise up. Yeah, rise up, everybody in the house. Yeah, rise up to everybody who's watching us via YouTube as well. Those of you watching us via YouTube, kindly remember to give us a like as well. So we've got some of the family in the house here joining us in the audience.
Thank you, Dr.
Via
Winters.
YouTube, via Zoom, and via YouTube. Absolutely fantastic. What a presentation, what a presentation. You know, family, as we said at the beginning of the show, Dr. Rev Shock has produced this paper, and he's just given us some extracts from that paper there, but it just goes to show, you know, the science that has gone into, you know, trying to prove that we as a people are inferior, and the extent to which, you know, they use their policies and their laws to enforce their ideology, you know, and, you know, they've tried to reduce us, you know, to the position of subhumans. And, you know, as Dr. Clyde reminds us, we are the original people. We are the original humans. We are the first, the ones that populated the globe, the ones that brought civilization to the world. We are the ones that gave them their humanity, that taught them. Facts. And they turn around and, you know, do all of this to us as a people. And, you know, it's in the 80s when, you know, many of us in sort of my sort of circles in the UK were like fighting against racism. We didn't have this backdrop. We didn't have this information about the extent to which it had been embedded in law and policies, and, you know, how the framework of it had all been developed. You know, we were actually fighting in a vacuum. And so for you to bring this information and this knowledge to us, you know, about the stating, mixing, classification and spacing, and how that all works, and how they managed to bring on board all of their so-called white trash, you know, to feel superior, so-called superior to us as a people. It just puts it all into perspective. And like you said towards the end, very importantly, is going to be about the reverse engineering, how we, you know, the science that we come up with to reverse all of this. Wow. So Dr. Rev, I look to you to decide how we go forward. We've got some wonderful people in the audience. I'm sure some of them might be bursting to put a question or to make a contribution. The great thing about that they can come live to do it. Plus, you know, we've got family watching via YouTube as well, who have been posting questions and comments. So rise up, Sister Afrijama, rise up, Sister Sherilyn, rise up, Dr. Winters. If you would like to jump in and make a contribution, just raise your hand and we will bring you forward. This is exciting. We can get, you know, input from our family members who are viewing us from the comfort of their home. So just go to, where would you find it? Wherever you find it, just put your hand up, just wave. Let me see if there's anybody waving that I can't see. Let's go to the gallery view.
Sherilyn is waving.
Okay, welcome, Sherilyn. My computer's running a bit slow, apologies, but jump in, Sherilyn.
Okay. Hi, family. So
Greetings.
I wanted to know,
Cheryl.
Dr. Shock. So you said by law, the one drop rule went into effect when it did. So now what is considered, because we still use that term, one drop, and we consider you Black. So what is it now?
Actually, that's a great question. It's also a question for Dr. Winters. There's no such thing because we are all Black people. Our ancestry is African. So there is no, the one drop rule is what they use to separate us. It's another divide and conquer strategy and process. So it doesn't exist.
But okay, so now we're seeing all the mixed race advertisement being thrown at us, the mixed race of the commercials of seeing the Caucasian person and then the Black person with it, or the mixed race Black person with them. So there's a push some sort of way to try to, I guess, bring us together, maybe?
Nope. It's not to bring us together. It's that there's a huge birth dearth, so big and so powerful. The quote unquote European or white race is facing extinction. So in order to live, in order to continue whiteness behavior, they have to now mate, again, giving access to anti-miscegenation gave white men access to all women. So they have to go back into the Black just to maintain and create a hybrid, just like they did before. But now it's to save them. So the issue is that because it's African ancestry, and we know that once you go Black, you can't go back. Once we are the dominant, we have the dominant genes. We have to now look at this ideology because they're fighting for they're fighting for the ideology of whiteness to be biologic, and it's not. So our job is to interrupt that signal, let people know that these people were invented as a matter of law. They came out of the caves, they went through the dark ages. They are a species not of original first frequency African people, and that they are, everything that they have said about us is really about them. They're the stain. They're the stain, not us. We are the original people. So because of them trying to stay alive, the only way they can stay alive is to enter into that Black womb.
And then they're adding drops of us. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Goddess. Hopefully that answered your question.
Tuka Pamoja in the chat via YouTube is saying, yes, the doctor is absolutely right about their dwindling numbers. So thank you for that question there, Sherilyn. Let's go back over to YouTube, see if we've got...
I see a brother named Niosi. Here's a guy, he has his hand raised.
Welcome. Kiambote, Yenge Kiambote, my brother. Let me bring you forward.
Yenge Mpimpa Kiambote, Sister Shanice, I come to you, my brothers and sisters, after sunset in a spirit of peace and balance. Great show, and thank you for allowing me in, Sister Shanice. For someone like myself, being born in the Congo, having been raised in Belgium and spent 25 years in England here, not as articulate in English as yourself, I am discovering a great deal of information about what America really was like back in Belgium, when we saw, the movie stars like Bobby Brown, Michael Jackson. It was so cool to be in the USA. I wanted to be Black American, but looking at this, life must have been something else, something very, very different. Anyhow, allow me to ask, because I'm very new to your work here. You keep on referring to Caucasians as not the original people. Can you expand on that in relation to the original people? What relation is there? If they're not original, what are they, please? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Nielsi. So, understanding from our work with Dr. Clyde Winters, a group of us got caught in the Ice Age. Now, there's research that suggests, like that movie, The Day After Tomorrow, that certain parts of the Ice Age, it was so cold that I think they said they had a woolly mammoth that still had the contents of its food in its stomach. So that means everything, certain parts froze instantaneously. And so a group of us were forced into the caves in order to survive. Unfortunately, this lasted for, I think the worm glaciation was the last glaciation of the Ice Age. Wikipedia says it lasts over 100,000 years. So over that time period, because there was no sunlight, because there was no food, we began to devolve as a species, as a group, as opposed to evolve. Now the rest, when the ice melted, by the time ice melted, Black people had already populated the entire planet. We were evolving, we were building, we had civilizations, but in the caves, it was a devolving situation. So they lost their melanin. All of their melanin went into their hair to keep them warm. They became ghostly in their appearance. They had to initiate cannibalism in order to eat. So they started hunting and killing one another. So it was very unsafe. And so, of course, the psychological factors began to break down as a result of the level of trauma that they were facing and dealing with. It's amazing that they survived at all. Once the ice melted, that moves us into the series that I'm doing with Brother Keenan Booker. That moves us into the Dark Ages and medieval times, that when this species emerged, I remember there was a PowerPoint presentation that Professor Kava did, where he talked about the devs and where the term the devil comes from. They came out of these caves wearing animal skins and covered in blood, and hence the term civilization and barbarism by Sheikh Anta Diop. This was a barbaric group. Now, going into the axiology of Dr. Edwin Nichols, teaching us that we, as an African people, are people to people, person to person. It means that we love family, we love to help, we love to assist. So we saw this devolved group that didn't have language, didn't have spirituality, didn't have anything, and we helped them and nurtured them because that's our nature. And we never saw it coming, that they would turn against us as a result of that. But I called them, and this is just Rev Shock stuff, Doc Shock stuff, I called them a different species or a separate species because spiritually, there's a part of us known as first frequency, the pineal gland, and what we are able to do as African people, as first people on the planet, they are not able to do. We are people of carbon, we are people of melanin, we are people of dark matter, dark energy. The darkness is where we thrive, it's where we come from. It's the realm where we have the most amount of control. They don't have control of the dark. One part of the Dark Ages is that they were afraid of the dark because everything in the dark killed them. And they start, and in the workshop that I do, I show you how the devil, the concept of the devil turns from like green to blue to black, and how this conflation of blackness and this hatred for blackness and anti-blackness began long before they landed here on this continent. So they came here with a proclivity of consciousness to separate the masses and separate and divide and conquer the people. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much. Let me just clarify for following on what you said about the devolved people. So it's not a case that you believe that there are some kind of alien, as in they're not Homo sapien sapien. It's not the case from your explanation.
No.
They derives, they are a de-evolution from us. Yes?
Correct.
According to, okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Great.
Understand that because they are so evil, they're so debaucherous, some of us have literally come up with fairy tales. It's like, this group can't be from planet Earth. They had to come from a spaceship somewhere out in freaking Saturn. So we have come up with all kinds and tried to put science behind it. It's like, no. They're us turned inside out. So I use the concept of a doppelganger. The doppelganger is the evil side or the evil version of an individual. That's what they are to us. They are a species that weren't supposed to survive nature, because nature tried to kill them, not just in the caves where they became recessively genetic, but when the ice melted, their immune systems were shot. So they were just walking diseases. Everything they touched was diseased and decrepit. As a result of that, the weather, nature, Ma'at, tried to kill them with the weather, with what's known as the mini ice age or the little ice age theory. A lot of people don't know about that. So millions of them died. They died in floods. They died in famine. They were so emaciated, some of them, that they suffered from what's known as refeeding syndrome. Refeeding syndrome is when some of them were so malnourished that you could see through, like if the sun or the light, you could see through their, you could see their organs, you could see through their bodies because they were so thin and emaciated. And refeeding syndrome, some of them hadn't eaten for so long that when they did eat food, it killed them. So this is an actual thing that, you know, it's like if you are starved for so long, getting food and water will actually kill you. They didn't have running water. They didn't have clean water. They learned how to make wine, and they started drinking wine to keep them warm, to make them feel good and feel better. If you go into the history, 99% of them, both the rich and the poor, were all alcoholics. They weaned their babies off of breast milk and started feeding the children, the babies, wine. But the problem was the wine had lead poisoning because of the containers that they were using. So now they're brain damaged. And then it was a whole slew of things that happened after that, even above that. These people are out of their minds. So I'm taking the deep dive in, and I'll be bringing all of that content out to the community as well. But our scholars have missed probably the most important part of the history of who these people are and how they came to be, and that's the medieval times and the Dark Ages.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sister
Interesting.
Shanice.
Thank you for that, Brother Nuusi. We have these conversations on my show, and you know, he knows very well the minefield that he's stepping into there, because there are, you know, various schools of thoughts on how these people, you know, originate, where they originate from. Were they, you know, from us?
They don't have any superpowers. They don't have any alien superpowers. They are defeatable, and we're going to figure it out. I'm sorry, not to interrupt.
That's okay. And then obviously there is a school of thought that they are a separate species, that they are not of us because of the Neanderthal DNA that they have, and the research.
Well, that was debunked. That was debunked by Dr. Winters. Neanderthals were us. Dr. Winters, why don't you come out and give us that little snippet if you could? that's why we love Dr. Winters to correct our history. Go ahead, Dr. D.
We love Dr. Winters.
Dr. Winters.
And just to say, it's okay for us to have different schools of thought as well. We don't all have to subscribe, to the same historical narrative.
I absolutely agree with that.
Let the audience know that we're not in disagreement. We're a difference of opinions in terms of, our interest and our areas of definition and interpretation of our origins, and that's okay.
Absolutely. And let me say this, my beloved. Let me say this: that as a result of that, for me, I, as a scientist, I follow a certain code, a certain creed. If I cannot prove it, then it's a hypothesis at best. But Dr. Winters, you want to talk to us about the concept of the Neanderthal?
Okay, well, the concept of the Neanderthal is that the Neanderthal was the Negro. The only difference was that back in the day, the researchers found these bones. When they found the bones, they found in the sense that the most ancient people in Europe were basically what they call Neanderthal. But see, originally Neanderthal was just another Negro. But see, over time, in a sense, white people, at first they tried to pretend that Black people didn't carry Neanderthal genes. But we know that was all a lie. You see, it's just that these people are trying to develop and develop a sense of existence. You see, you got to understand that even when we go back in the day, you could be Black. This is deep now. You have to really think about this. You could be Black, but if you came from Europe and you were native to Europe, you were white.
That's right.
See, it's very important. See, this comes from the research of a sister of Dr. Marie Charles. Is that what you find in a sense? Because see, even during Bacon's rebellion, many of the people, in a sense, would have been dark skinned. They would have been called Negro based upon the one drop rule. That's why they didn't have the one drop rule at first. But see, based upon the one drop rule, Dr. Shock has just shown you pictures of Plessy. You just saw Plessy. You saw how he looked, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they didn't know that he was quote unquote a Negro, he could have passed for white, right? You saw his picture.
That's right.
You saw his picture. Therefore, what many Black people can't understand is that many Black people want to believe that black, white is a color, like a crayon color. They don't understand that it's a lot more deeper. And I think that this is what Dr. Shock is working on. It's a lot more deeper than color. Because see, we know in a sense that many of those people would have been labeled Black back in the day in Thomas Jefferson's day. But they were labeled in a sense white because they were European, just like because they came from Europe. And that nationalism, that nation state gave them that appearance. This is what you have to understand when you look at Plessy versus Ferguson. And that we know in a sense also this. Look at the day, and I want you to answer this question. The Neanderthals were Black. They weren't wild people. They weren't crazy people. They didn't kill each other. They didn't go mad during the Ice Age because they built their own houses. They had their own warmth. They had their own clothing. So they were okay. The thing about Caucasians is that when Black people went into the caves and because during the Dryas period, 10,000 years ago during the Dryas period, people ran into the caves, which were their temples. When they ran into these caves, they devolved. They devolved. They changed in a sense from Black to white, mainly because the fact is that when you're in a dark environment, you can't produce melanin. The melanin goes to your hair instead of the skin, you see. And that's one of the reasons why you find that many Caucasians have different hair color. They can go from brown to Black, whatever, and they can be in the same family. Whereas in a Black family,
And that's why
People
brown eyes turn blue or green over time, because it lacks the melanin. And so
That's
it can
right.
be, you can have gray
That's
eyes,
right.
green eyes, blue eyes. Yeah. But it's not a natural occurrence in nature.
That's right. And so remember, in the sense that everything becomes albino when they live in a cave. What happened is that because of the fact that these people lived in a cave and they had to eat each other, they became very xenophobic, because remember, they were half blind. They were half blind. And the reason they were half blind is because, in a sense, they had to, in a sense, be able to see in the dark. And you can't see in the dark. That's why many second frequency Caucasian people are very, very psychic. They're very psychic, and they communicate in different ways. And so Neanderthal man has nothing to do with the Caucasians today. The Caucasians today came from their experience in the cave, and they didn't come out the caves until the volcanic eruption of the Santorini. The Santorini volcano, once it erupted, the caves in the Caucasus Mountains opened up. And as the caves in the Caucasus Mountains opened up, these Caucasians came out. There were already a certain group of white people already existing, and we called them the white Arabs. You know, the Syrians. You saw Syrians. You saw Assad.
Mm-hmm.
You saw Assad, the president of Syria.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen it before, right? And so this was a white Arab. The white Arabs were already here. But the Caucasian people, on the other hand, they came out of the caves and they began to expand from from Central Asia into Europe. When they came into Europe, they tried to, in a sense, remember, the Caucasian has been able to disguise his history and his origin by killing off everybody that's non-European. But see, one thing, so they didn't come from Neanderthals. But this is what I want you to explain to me, Dr. Shock, if you will. You know, we see, in a sense, as I said before, back in the day, you were a white, even if you would be labeled Negro over here, you were white if you were born in Europe and you were of European heritage. I didn't say European ancestry, but European heritage. What I want you to explain to me, Reverend Matthews, is we see lately many of these Latino people, they have an African ancestry, like the guy who shot the people in Texas. And yet on their birth certificates, they put down they're white. And then they carry out these attempts to kill other Latinos. And they like the guy in Texas over the weekend. He killed a Korean family. He killed a white family, and he killed, in a sense, a lot of Latinos and shot them up. How do you explain this white consciousness? See, people better move away from this whole idea that when they talk about black and white, it always centers on a crayon color. How do you explain that consciousness, Dr. Shock?
Well, thank you for that, Dr. Winters. Yeah, it's not a color, it's a consciousness. It's a characteristic, it's a trait, it's a behavior. And whiteness is, when white people were invented, that moment in 1681, that was the beginning, the birth of white supremacy. Colonialism turned into white supremacy when white people were invented as a matter of law. All of that started to conflate and come together and put the African at the bottom. Now here, talking about the birth dearth, here's the other thing that the white elites are attempting to do, and that is they've always successfully, unfortunately, created a divide and conquer strategy and a barrier group. They've used the Asians against us. They've used the Arabs against us as a buffer class. But now, because of all of the immigrants, the Latinx people that are coming to this country, they get an opportunity to choose their classification, and that classification is usually white, and they vote Republican. It's a way for them to keep the ideology of whiteness, which is both Democrat and Republican, but more Republican than Democratic, to keep whiteness alive and to keep Black people in their place. So they're going to prop up the Latinx people and separate and put the Latinx people above us. They've already done that with the Asians and the Arabs, but this is part of how they stay alive, is by keeping the ideology alive. They know that white people have no biologic. They know that it is an ideologic, and as a result, if that idea were to break, the country would see everything would break. Everything would cease to exist. This is why they're working so hard to remove. I just read somewhere in Florida that they have some law, I think it's DeSanto's law or something, where if a student doesn't feel comfortable, if a teacher is teaching about Black history, this just happened. A teacher was teaching about just, basic Black history. A student felt uncomfortable. Now it's a law that if a student feels uncomfortable learning Black history, white history, that the teacher is legally not obligated. Legally, they can't teach it anymore. So now the students are running the curriculum and dictating what the curriculum and what they want to learn. So you have to understand cognitive dissonance is very, very real with this group. They don't want to be second frequency. They don't want to be what they are. They don't want to go back to the Dark Ages. They don't want to go back to the caves. They would love to have a first story like us and build pyramids and master all science. They would love to be able to say that we sat at their feet and learned from them, but that's not the case. They don't want their children to know the truth. They don't want to know the truth because the truth will completely erase and dismantle this concept we know today as whiteness. And so Latinx people are right in there that are very vulnerable to this as well. Many of them don't want to have anything to do with being Black and having they're looking at their heritage as a biologic, and it's not. It's an ideologic. Hopefully that answered your question, Dr. Winters. Was there anything else?
If I can add to that as well, thank you for raising that, Dr. Winters. Yes, preceding the laws that were introduced in America, as Dr. Winters has just touched on and pointed to, was in Europe. The fact that during the Cromwell era, Black people, Africans, who were the majority population at that time in Europe still, some of them who were being deported to the Americas, deported to Jamaica, deported to Montserrat and various other islands, were actually, some of them were defined as white. These were the Black Jews, the Blackamoors, the Black aristocracies. They were classified as white. So white, back in about 1649 or so, preceding the prior to the laws referenced here, back then, there was a white classification. And a couple of strongs ago on one of my radio shows as well, one of our scholars played a clip of an Egyptian who, in all appearance, appeared Black, was being told that he was white and to classify himself as white, because being Egyptian and being an Arab, they were telling him, meant that his classification ought to be white. So even until recent times, from way back in about 1649 or something like that, during the era of Oliver Cromwell, we can see in Europe, Black people, Africans, being classified as white. So white is a classification, and that they went to the Americas with this classification. And it seems the whites at some point decided to capitalize on that and to change the classification from Blacks being allowed to be classified as whites to, people of a certain hue. being classified as white. So I think that's really important in terms of also looking at the history, because to be honest, that's something that I've only become aware of within the last year or so, because there's some, scholars out there, researchers, we call ourselves researchers, not even scholars, doing some great works in that era. And so, so that's
you
like
also
that
bring up a great point, Goddess, because you were talking about classifying. So that classification is part of that race technology, classifying. So you're absolutely right. Go ahead, Doc.
And I think a very good important fact is this, is that in 1751, not Thomas Jefferson, but Benjamin Franklin, he wrote that the only white race were the Anglo-Saxons. And this is so crazy, because Sister Shanice has written a fantastic book about King Offa. And the thing is that he was Black. So even the Anglo-Saxons were Black. And so see, what many of us forget is that when they were talking about Black people, that's right, you wrote a great book, Shanice, a great book.
Thank you. Brother Nusi was just showing the book up there in the audience. Thank you,
there it is. Niosi, he's got it up there. That's the book. And see, the point that you have to understand is that when we look at history, we have to look at history from a different perspective. Given the research of Sister Shanice, Shanice, when she did that book on Offa, that makes it clear that Benjamin Franklin didn't know what he was talking about. Or just like, look at how, see, this is why the work of Dr. Schock is so important. The work of Reverend Matthews is important, because what he's trying to let us understand is that race is a technology, race is a creation, and they had to go through these 4 steps to make things real. Because see, if King Offa was an Anglo-Saxon, and Anglo-Saxons were the only whites, and yet, if we look at him from a phenotypical perspective, if we look at him from a genetic perspective, he was African. But see, we had the thing that we don't understand is that when they talk about the Black race, when they're talking about the Black race in the 1600s, when they're talking about the Black race in the early 1700s, they were not talking about, in a sense, Black people per se. They were talking about the African, because most of the Aboriginals were Black. They didn't run into Mongoloid Indians until much later. But see, that's why the research of Shanice is so important. This whole idea of focusing on what is Black, what is white. We had to move away from that crayon perspective. That idea that people were being in a sense classified as Dr. Matthews just talked about.
It's a dosha. It's a dosha. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And it's ideology. Ideology is more important.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yes.
100%.
And we were talking about ideology today, coincidentally, on my radio show. We had a presentation from our brother Momo, and he was talking about the power of the Arab ideology and how, the northern part of Africa pushing into West Africa had been Arabized, and the Arabization of that part of Africa, and how that ideology, which encompasses the culture, the language, the religion, the dress, etc., how it's just taken over the minds of a lot of Africans, and and how that's contributed towards the war in Sudan, even, where we are fighting over ideologies, just as we were during the days of Oliver Cromwell. We used the religious ideology of Catholics and Protestants to kill each other, to weaken ourselves. And so what's happening in Sudan now is that the Arab ideology that's consumed the minds of these fighters against the indigenous people to push them further into sub-Saharan Africa, so that the Arabs can take over that part of Sudan, where there's so much evidence of our ancient civilization yet to be uncovered, in the same way that they have, captured Egypt and are trying to capture all of the history that goes with Egypt. You know, they're trying now also to capture Sudan and all of that rich history in Sudan that they want to claim as their own. In 1,000 years' time, that land will be Arab land, and they will be claiming, you know, all of that history in that region. So, well, Dr. Winters, please come in. I can see you wanting to come in here.
This is it. This is it.
Keep talking. I'm going to run to the restroom. I'll be right back, family.
I'm so glad they're having a war. I'm so glad they're having a war in Ukraine, because we gotta get rid of those Ukrainian women. Let me explain to you what I'm talking about. Is this that conflict in the Sudan is a little bit is about the Arab, but really America is upset because of the fact that the government of the Sudan, the army, was going to give up a naval base to the Russians. So they got the RFP, the Rapid Defense Force, is trying in a sense to get rid of the army. That's just so. See, America's upset because the Western powers are going down. Because of the fact that the Western powers are going down, they're trying to isolate the Russians. If the Russians get a base in Sudan, then that means, in a sense, the Russians will have a naval base at the tip of the Red Sea. And so that's why the United States is supporting the Rapid Defense Force, because the Rapid Defense Force, they're the most racist, the most hateful people. Because remember, people forget that it was the Rapid Defense Force that killed all those people in Darfur. Remember, they were going around killing. They're very bloodthirsty people, in a sense. And so that war is about the native, about them trying to ensure that America can keep the Russians out. But this is what I want to talk about. When Shanice was talking about the North Africa, we have to remember what happened in North Africa. Everything was going good until those black men wanted to bring in all those. See, when they talk about slavery, they lied to you. They're lying to you. When they talk about slavery, they always talk about the black slaves in a sense, who were sold into the Arab world. That's a lie, because most of the so-called black slaves that brought the salt, you know, up into North Africa, most of the time these black slaves eventually, in a sense, would be would in a sense stop being slaves, because of the fact that, in a sense, that they became Muslims. So it wasn't a lot. No. The thing that destroyed North Africa was those Turks, those Ottomans, bringing in all those Ukrainian women. And those Ukrainian women is what turned the North Africans into light skin. And I hate to say this, Shanice, but they also you have to remember, the ideal woman in the white mind was the Ukrainian women, because they even used to buy Ukrainian white women slaves, and they brought them into Britain, and they brought them into Norway. And that's how they were able, in a sense, to get the population to change from being dark skinned to light skinned. It's those Ukrainian women. You got to keep those Ukrainian women down, because see, they are. Oh yes. Look at those harems that those Moors had in North Africa, mainly full of white women.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you got 10 white concubines, and they all have children. Do you see how North Africa now is so light skinned? The same thing they did over in Britain. Britain bought a lot of Ukrainian slave women. That's how they lighten up the population, because your research, you know, you've done considerable research, Shanice, and your research shows that most of these people are black. Yeah, Neosi, I know you're getting upset. I know you're getting confused, but I'm trying to tell you, the history of Europe is so much more complicated, and we got to keep those Ukrainian women away. I saw this guy on TV, and he's somebody who said, Walmart, are the Ukrainian women trying to kill them. Get those Ukrainian women, keep them away from the black man. I'm gonna tell you, those Ukrainian women, they have some good Caucasian genes, because it looked like a black man can mate with a Caucasian, with a Ukrainian woman, and it seems as though that baby gonna come out too light. I'm sorry.
Unbelievable. That was great. Thank you for that, Dr. Winters.
Love you, Dr. Clyde.
We need to get his medications early. I love it. I love them. That was good.
Dr. Rev, let's
Shanice,
allow you to come back.
Shanice hid my medicine. Shanice took my medicine away. It's all Shanice's fault. It's Shanice's fault. Shanice, she did it. Give me my medicine. Give me my sippy cup.
Give him his pills back, Shanice. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Dr. Clark, just the way he is.
Oh,
Shanaz
that
is
was awesome.
laughing in the chat. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, Dr. Rev, you know, wonderful, wonderful works that you've done there, you know, with all the research that you've done and the information that you've brought in, you know, about the science behind their classification of whiteness. We all need to be of that understanding, that understanding of that. And I looked at the paper. Let me just quickly flick through, see if there's something that I might want to pull out of there. Oh,
Sure.
Wow. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, oh, wow. They were at one point, you know, you said in your paper, trying to create the idea that the classification of us being at the bottom of the chain was biological, you know, and they brought in all of their scientists, the science of racism, you know, to try and use science as well to justify why we, you know, as a people, they were saying, you know, were ideologically inferior. And, you know, for me, that just reinforces the extent to which they're prepared to go, and their scholars and their scientists are all prepared to go to try and fabricate, you know, a history or an image of us as Africans. You know, you put in here that they had all these different kind of categories. They had the European albus, that's the European white, the Americanus, Rebusians, you can pronounce it for me, please, the American reddish, they had the Asiaticus, Fucus, the Asian tawny, and here they had at the bottom the Afrikaner so-called N-word, the African black. You know, they sort of based this kind of arbitrary characteristics you were saying, and then they went on to talk about how we don't have any feelings. Oops, sorry, I accidentally touched wrong button there. How we don't have any feelings, and we have a higher threshold, you know, when it comes to pain, and all of this so-called.
Well, if you remember, that was also, I'm going to put it in the chat too. I did a piece from Dr. Marie Charles on the 3 H's. So this race technology informed Heidegger, Hegel, and Husserl. They are the 3 H's that the scientists, the quote unquote, the enlightened scientists that basically said Black people have no culture at all. So you can begin to see how the race technology, the ideology of race technology informed the dosha, or the confirmation. Another word for dosha is confirmation bias. So they had a bias going in, a false confirmation bias going in. And so then they try to scientifically prove it through philosophy. And because you're dealing with
I'm not sure what's happening there, Dr. Rev. There's an awful noise coming through. Okay, we've got a bad noise coming through. Sincere apology for that. Okay, stop. So, not sure what that was while you were talking there.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, hearing you, and that awful noise has gone.
Okay, yeah.
Can everyone just remind everyone to put their device on mute as well, please? Okay, go ahead, Dr. Shaw.
What was I? So the 3 H's talked about, and they were the ones that informed, you know, the drapetomania, that Black people were mentally ill for wanting not to be slaves and running away from slavery. There was a mental illness that Black people had because they were enslaved, and that they didn't want to be enslaved, so they called it drapetomania, because they, in their mind, slavery was great for Black people, for African people. These 3 H's and this race technology informed the medical community that Black people have a higher tolerance for pain. I still experience that today when I was in the hospital with my queen. They just wouldn't give her the pain medications that she needed. They wouldn't give me the pain medications that I needed because in their mind, they think that we have a higher threshold for pain. They treat us differently. And this is just who this group is. So there is just, after a certain amount of time, you just have to start looking at what happened to these people where they are just psychologically insane in a very real sense. I did this entire piece called Fascination Violence, where we learned that this group has a fascination for hunting humans. They are the first and only species that has a fascination for hunting humans. So they hunt each other, they hunt us, they kill animals for sport. They're the only people to do that as opposed to for food. So there's a fascination with violence and debauchery that no other group in history has seen. So when we start to look at the consciousness of these people, the characteristics, traits, and behaviors of these people, we begin to tease out that, yes, this is a different species, because in the understanding of how the world works, a species doesn't hunt itself. A species that recognizes itself does not hunt itself. It doesn't hunt its own. So we have to look at, say, I know this takes us out of our axiology of being person to person, people to people. We might have white people in our family. We might have, a Europeans in, in our work group, in our social lives or whatever. But this is a different group. And when they are racially threatened, which is what white fragility is about, when they're racially threatened, you begin to see this level of violence and debauchery and how they behave. I think Dr. Winters has his hand raised, I think.
I have a question, Reverend Ash.
Yes.
I noticed that for some reason, white people, as you said, second frequency or Caucasians, they have a thing about self-mutilation. They have a thing about the body. Why is it that it seems as though many Caucasians hate that whole idea of the body? They gotta destroy the body, torture it. What about all that? How can you explain that?
Well, from understanding what happened to them in the ice and also what they went through in the Dark Ages, they hate themselves. They hate their bodies. They hate being. It's crazy psychologics. They hate being translucent, which is why today they want to have color and get tans and what have you. But they also they think white is pure. So if you look at the Dark Ages, what started to happen with the elites is they started wearing makeup to whiten their skin to look purely white. Well, the reason that they did that is because they were recessively genetic, because the weather tortured them. They had every disease you could possibly list and imagine. They were putrid people. By covering their skin and turning it white, it made them look and feel superior, made them feel better about themselves. And the real reason is because they hate themselves. And the reason they hate themselves, this goes to Dr. Francis Cress Welsing's work of reaction formation. Reaction formation is when you want to be something, or you want to do something, or you want to have something so bad, but you will never, ever, 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 ever be able to be, do, and have that. So then rather than look at it and realize it and give thanks for it, you victimize it and you vilify it. And that's what they've done to Black people. They have victimized and vilified the fact that they want to be Black. They want to be able to produce Black children. They cannot. And they want to be able to produce melanin. They cannot. They want to be able to enter into the darkness, the Blackness, the Akashic records. They cannot. And so they hate the original people, which means that this is why they had to invent the white boy in the stick, the white boy in the sky, or they invent the concept of religion and God, because that's their spiritual story, because they can't co-opt Ma'at. They can't co-opt the original spiritual system. That original spiritual system rejected them. This is why they're, if you will, called kicked out of heaven. Hopefully that answered your question, Dr. Winters. I think Nielsi has his hand raised.
Yes, he does. Dr. Winters, did that answer your question?
That answered my question, yes.
Okay, fantastic. And, I just wanted to add a comment to that as well.
Yeah.
And someone in the chat mentioned about a scary experience that they had in an emergency situation as well. Let me see if I can find that. So Rise Up, creates so fear. Says that, yes, that pain misconception. I remember a scary emergency room visit I had years ago where they began cutting a small part of my back open after giving me a pill. Eventually, they had to put me under probably anesthetic, that was. To think that, and so, all that you've talked about in your paper there and what their scientists have indoctrinated into their minds about us as a people is still very much, affecting the way that we are being treated today as a people. And, when you go on to talk about how they perceive us and how they've classified us as inferior, as immoral and animal-like, that is why, going back to the war in Sudan, and going back to, them trying to claim Egypt, all of the history in that region rebuts all of their claims and all of their so-called science, because therein lies the evidence, as well as, across the rest of the world, of our ancient civilizations and our greatness. Okay, let's bring in again Brother News. Do you have another question for us? And just to say, anyone on Zoom, if you have a question that you'd like to put to our special guest, I'm honored now, I've got two special guests in the house. If you'd like to put, to our beloved Rev. Dr. Philip Schock or our beloved Dr. Clyde Winters, just show me your hand and we will bring you in. Let's bring in Brother Newellsy.
Thank you, Sister Shanice. Just a quick question to Dr. Schock. So would you say that your concept of first frequency as opposed to second frequency is more a psychological, psychiatrical concept as opposed to metaphysical, or is there link? Because in
it's philosophical, right?
Sorry?
It's philosophical, and metaphysics is a European concept. It's really African sacred science, and so I have to take the European version and I have to Africanize everything, right? So it's more philosophical. This is why it's called Africana phenomenology. And Africana phenomenology is the physiological, physiological aspect of how great we are as a people, all the nuances of how do we think, how do we differ, what do we do differently from this particular group of people. So it's not just metaphysics. I use metaphysics because of vibration and frequency, because we're frequency people. Everything that we do is about vibrating and feeling. But it is really the psychological, the characteristics, traits, behaviors. And I also like what Dr. Winters refers to it as the consciousness. There's a consciousness of this group that needs to be really studied more than it has ever been thus far, to bring this information out so people now can understand that there ain't nothing special about these people. They lucked out over hundreds of years of war, but there's nothing special about this group. In fact, this group is autogenocidal. They're killing themselves off as well as nature is killing them off. So they have two sides that is dedicated to their extinction.
Yeah, and taking us in the process.
Yes, and we're in the way. Yeah, and we have to interrupt that signal. I use the joke all the time about when you were a kid, did your mom ever say, if Joey rides his bike off the cliff, are you going to ride your bike off the cliff with Joey, right? Well, Black people, in a sense, we don't have a bike. We're on Joey's handlebars. So if Joey goes off the cliff, we're face first off the damn planet. We gotta get our own bike back. Is what I want to have. I want my own bike so I can turn this shit around. Go ahead. I think Mom
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Sister Shanice. I could go on and on. If there is someone else who wants to put a question, I have so many questions. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother Nusi. So if there's anyone else with a question, please jump in. Lots of conversations going on.
Unmute yourself, Mom.
Oops. Yeah, I'm unmuted. Are you not hearing me?
We can hear you.
Are you not hearing me?
I can hear
good. You are hearing me. Oh, fantastic. Sorry, I thought you said I was muted.
Somebody has a hand raised, but they can't. I don't think they can unmute themselves.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Let me find that person. Who's got their hand raised?
Who has their hand raised? Okay, I don't know. I can't see it on my side.
You see the name?
Well, it's Mom, M-U-M. I see M-U-M, but her mic, their mic is muted.
Okay, Mom, you have your hand raised. You want to unmute yourself? Let me just ask to unmute. And yeah, put your question to our guest. Oh, here you go.
There we go.
Greetings. I've lost
I'm the daughter of Pauline. She's that's my mum, Pauline, that you just saw before, actually. So she originally joined, but I just joined because she had it playing. So she usually does play stuff out loud, and I just listening as well. So I was listening in for quite a bit, and Dr. Shock was talking about frequencies, and he was talking about how studying the consciousness of this demographic of people. But I wanted to kind of pose an idea that basically scientifically that the body has its own frequency, right? Our cells vibrate at a certain frequency. And it's different for everybody. And I think also, I was wondering whether you thought there was a connection to that, maybe how our cells vibrate and how that would affect also them consciously. Because I think there's a connection between biology and consciousness, which I think you've been talking about as well. So I think that's what it is. Well, I think possibly as, they've gone through, this group of people have gone through a degrade, sorry, I can't speak.
Segregation.
Yes, exactly. In their genetics and their biology, how also degrades their level of consciousness as well. It's directly connected in, as in, do you know what I was trying to say? Sorry.
I'm gonna try to come out. I'm gonna try to come back in there with this. So all right, so let's go back to come forward a little Sankofa here of the Dark Ages, understand how these people were living.
Yeah.
And what caused some of the things to cause them to lose their mind. Now, this group, because of their fascination violence, because of what they experienced in the caves, they have a fascination with death. They have mastered death, and they love death and vengeance and hunting. Now, during the time that they were living in quote unquote medieval dark ages, they went through everything. They went through every kind of they went through what's known as the manias. There was what's known as, because they had lost their mind, because they had lost everything. They were absolutely impoverished. They had nothing. They lived the term. What's the term? A piss to pot in and a house, a window to throw it out of. They didn't have toilets, so they would take their poop and their waste and they would throw it out the window. And this scent would build up over time. throughout the town. Dead animals, dead people were strewn everywhere. So the scent of death was always present in the air. Many of them only lived till about age of 25 to 30 because they didn't have the immune systems. Eventually, over time, their immune systems began to get strong and they developed an immunity against all of the diseases and what have you. But it took, hundreds of years for that to happen. But this group was just, they were stank. They were just really a nasty, vile group of people, and they lived in debauchery. They lived with their animals. I can show you data where there was a locust that died off in the waters, and the putrid, decaying bodies of the locust fumigated the air. People dropped dead from the fumes of the locust. I can show you where when the locusts covered their homes because they didn't have good roofing, that the feces of locusts would fall into their homes and onto their bedding. I can show you the lice and the bed bugs that they were tormented with every night. I can show you why their hair fell out and why they started wearing wigs, the British wigs, and those British wigs had lice, and how they used bloodletting to try to kill the lice. And these people were they were tortured. And nature really didn't want them here. I did not want these people to survive, but they did, and then they adapted, which is why they're antithetical to nature. Everything about them is trying to control nature. Everything about us is trying to be one with nature. So we are forever separate as a group because of what they have gone through and what they devolved into. They never were supposed to be here, but now they're here, and guess what? We got to deal with it. But once you understand what happened to them, you no longer feel powerless against them. You really realize that Black people are the ish. Like, I don't do that for self-esteem. I'm doing this based on science. I don't care how you feel. I just know Black people are the best of the best, and I can scientifically prove that from the sacred to the secular. So as above and so below, it doesn't matter whether it's spiritual or whether it's anthropological, archaeological, linguistics, whatever. I can prove Black people are the most strongest, undefeatable, durable people ever created in humanity. And they're not. So, here it is.
Thank you
so much. Thank you so much for the question. And I'd love to add to that, actually. I mean, I just want to agree with,
on your channel. On your channel. It was on your channel. The last one was on, Goddess. It was a guy. I guess I had mentioned, I had called these cats a species. And it was some white guy in the chat says, "We're not a species. Who is this guy calling us a species?" I was like, "Oh shit!" I didn't mean to put that out there like that. That was a private session, but it is what it is, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I am just so much of that thought and I agree with all of what you say there, because for me, you were describing a separate species. And, I do believe that they are not at one with nature, whereas we are. And I do believe that we actually resonate on a different frequency. We are at one with the cosmos, and so are our ancestors, very much always studying the cosmos, because we were at one with the cosmos, so as above, so below. And we're doing some works with Joshua Mapongo on this panel. I'm doing some work with him as well.
Yeah. Yes.
A book of quotes that he's doing, and he's actually saying that our human body is actually made up of electromagnetic fields, and those electromagnetic fields enable us to actually connect on a number of different frequencies. And he's
is that right?
At the moment as kind of like not functioning on the right frequency. You know, it's as if our frequency has been jammed, and he sets out all these different frequencies, and, you know, like the frequency of 417 hertz that brings in a lot of negative energy like anger and anxiety and internal conflict. And there's the frequency of 432 hertz, which is for the body and the soul, and the frequency of 528 hertz, which repairs the DNA and can transform us and release inner conflict. So there's all these different levels of frequencies and magnetic rays that we don't see, but our ancestors knew were there. And these frequencies that we tap into, like the radio waves, the microwaves, and all these waves that go around the world, I mean, it's such fascinating stuff. But we are able, if we were on our right frequency, we would be able to tap into these different frequencies. And sometimes some of us are able to tap into these frequencies in a very profound way. It's as if the ancestors have brought the knowledge back into our DNA. So, for example, you've got like the Zimbabwean scientist who is able to invent, you know, a TV, a car, a helicopter, you know, for example, that can run off of, run without fuel, without fossil fuels, but on a frequency. You know, just like the radio waves, we are able to communicate via a frequency that we can't see, but actually exists. And so, you know, we are a people who are of energy. We even had Brother Nusis, who's here today, talking on my show earlier today about spirituality, which he was saying is the interconnection between the invisible and the visible. And the visible, you know, and talking about, you know, how creation happens in the invisible, and how that's where, you know, the spiritual realm is, and there is that interconnectivity. He can explain it better than me, but interconnectivity between the invisible and the visible. So there is a frequency, there is so much to us in terms of our electromagnetic frequency and our ability to resonate above the frequency that we're on, to tap into the knowledge of the cosmos, to tap into the knowledge of the spiritual realm. But it's as if our frequency has been jammed, and we are functioning on a lower frequency, on the frequency of the subhumans, you know, the ghastly ones, the other species that you talk about that crawled out the caves, that I don't believe were us, but that's another story. But you know what I'm saying.
No, you're absolutely right, beloved. Now, here's the interesting thing about it is understanding that, yeah, everything is about frequency. And I think Dr. Winters has his hand raised. And so we'll come to you, I'll yield to you next, Dr. Winters. But everything is frequency. We are the original people to master all frequencies, all sciences, sound waves, laser waves, everything. We were able to map out the stars. The Dogons are the greatest astrophysicists on the planet. So it's safe to say that this group, and I'm doing I'm in the middle right now. Friday, I think it will be week 6. I'm in the middle of a 12-week webinar series on breaking the signals and the spells of second frequency on first frequency people. So what we've learned is how to interrupt the interruption, right? Cobb always says how we were rudely interrupted. What we figured out how to do is how to rudely interrupt the rude interruption, and to be able to reestablish our first frequency wholeness again. And for many of us, for the very first time, because the trauma that we have been placed under since birth and even before birth has become part of our personality. So trauma that goes unabated looks like personality. As a result of that, we never get a chance to meet our true selves because we were snuffed out before we were born due to the epigenetics or the genetic memory of what's been encoded in us that gets transferred. Then we come out, and then as Mapanga would teach, I use I say it a little bit more graphically, but that is we come out and then we are introduced to what I call the 3 white boys. The white boy on the boat, which is Columbus, the white boy on the stick, which is Jesus, and then the white boy in the sky, which is God. That's not our story. That's right. That's our signal interruption. That's our spiritual interruption. So if I can spiritually interrupt you, then I can control your entire physicality in perpetuity. I yield to Dr. Winters.
You know, it's very important. You know, Shanice has brought up something very important. And what she brought up is this, is that we all operate off frequencies. And see, the Greeks and the Romans, what did they say? They said that they went to Egypt to learn. And the reason that the Egyptian priests were able to teach them something is that the Egyptian priests had the leisure time to think about things. Shanice, you're absolutely correct. Our signals are being interrupted by the fact is that if you notice, think about the history of our interactions with Europeans. Our interactions with Europeans, they've always complained about the fact is that we got to keep those Africans, those Black people working. See, they don't want you to be able, in a sense, to do anything but work, because the more you work, the less leisure time you have to deal with those frequencies out there. And see, we carry a lot of frequencies. I remember in some people, even today, they can look at you or they can look at me and they can tell you what aura surrounds us. I can't see it, but some people can see this. And so see, they interrupt our frequencies by always keeping us working, always keeping us upset. Look at the average Black person, by the time they get in their 40s and their 50s, they got high blood pressure, diabetes. They're taking pills because we've had so much trauma. We've had so much trauma, and this trauma causes us, in a sense, to not be able to relax. You're absolutely correct, Shanice, is that they interrupt us. And if there's different species of birds, come on now. If there's different species of birds, then there's different species of humans. But see, you have to understand is that the Caucasian runs away from that whole idea. At first, back in the day, he wanted to say that the races were separate and that they were different in a way, separate races. But now, because of the fact that if you look at separate races, then you had to put them into their own negative category. What they've done now is that they say that we're all one people. Everybody came from Africa. That's a damn lie. They didn't come from Africa. You can't find any skeletons of any ancient African people there. We know that the Berbers, most of the white Berbers, they're descendants from who? The Vandals, the Ottomans, the Arabs, all that type of stuff. We know that most of the white Berbers, their language is mainly Germanic. Even though they've been there for the past 400 or 500 years, 600 or 700 years, they're mainly, in a sense, descendants of the Vandals that invaded the continent. What's very important is having a leisure time to think, because see, we're dangerous when we have the time, in a sense, to think, to relax, and to be able, in a sense, to guide those frequencies. Because remember, the mystics will tell you is that heaven is only 2 feet off the ground. Heaven is only 2 feet off the ground, but we can't see it. And the way to understand frequency, Neosi has a question, so I'm gonna finish real quick. The best way to understand frequencies is to look at a fan. When that fan is turned off, you can see, in a sense, the different parts of the fan. But when you turn that fan off, you can see through the fan. But that fan is, the blades of the fan are still there. If you put your hand in there, your fingers are going to be cut or they're going to be injured. So that's the way frequencies are, ladies and gentlemen. Frequencies are just like that. You don't see them, but they exist. And each human or group of people have the same frequency, have different frequencies. And these frequencies are interrupted by people, in a sense, not allowing us to stay how we are. But Neosi has a comment.
Yes, we are over time, but we'll carry on for another 5-10 minutes or so if everyone stays with us. Wow, what a conversation we're having.
Melinda stating that she's coming on this evening with her first webinar series. So we're really excited for her. Melinda, I think, is out there in the audience. Black Money.
Great.
Yeah.
Post the link, Belinda, post the link.
Oh, let me put the link in there.
I've just posted the link, your links as well. Nothing is wrong with Black people. Something happened to us. I've posted those links in the YouTube one. I've also posted the link to my King Offer book. Thank you so much, Dr. Winters as well, who actually writes, a contribution in that book as well. A wonderful, wonderful commentary. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Winters. And thanks for just remembering as well to mention it. So so much love out to you. Yeah, so but I'll post that in YouTube as well. No more shame. Heal your Black money trauma now. It's a 4-week webinar series with Belinda Staton, and I will post that over at YouTube. Brother Nusi, come back with another question or point.
Yes, just another point. As you probably know, Sister Shanice, spirituality, energy, waves, that's my cup of tea. So I just wanted to add to what you started, to add a sort of perspective from the ancestral people of the Congo and the Baka, the Aka, the Bongo, the so-called Pygmy people. In our culture, that is this spirituality, you know, the interaction between us as a source of energy and the uncreated energy where we all come from, which is itself energy. That is proper initiation when you take it to a higher level, the higher level being all the problems that we have with the second frequency, to quote Dr. Shock here, can be resolved if we were as a community to return to a deeper understanding of who we are and what spirituality as defined by the Baka people is really, because this is what I was trying to explain this evening. It's really like connecting your own mind, body, and your invisible part of the energy that's around you back to its source. From there, because you back to, say, like the womb of your mother, where everything is warm, cozy, you will receive signal as you are here, to get a long story short, back from that source, and then there'll be interaction. From there, you will have ideas like Chikambuzu, how to manipulate nature and how to find solutions in this visible realm here. Because as it's been said here, Caucasian people are an offshoot of us. They are also energy, but connecting not as deep as ourselves. So in African culture proper, you learn this through your own language learning, which evidence that there is a counterpart between the visible and the invisible world. We are just a projection of the real world, which is not seen, which is energy. So I stop there, but this is something that we will come back on the big G. Thank you very much for the occasion.
Thank you so much, Brother Nusi, and thank you for your presentation this morning, which was all about spirituality and that interconnection between, the invisible and the visible, and that we are energy, we are magnetic fields, we are at one with the cosmos. We are, the real us is actually energy that you can't see, that's in the spiritual realm, that's connected to the image or the illusion, the hologram that you can see, and it was just phenomenal, that conversation. So thank you so much for that. I also want to thank the Jamaican Jamcra in the house watching us via YouTube. He said, as Sister Shanice show is always so uplifting, no matter how down I may be, your show lifts my spirits. Thank you, Queen. Thank you so much. And thank you also to my guests today, and to all those who joined us on the spotlight. Brother Nusi, Dr. Winters, what an honor as always, isn't it, Dr. Rev, to hear from Dr. Winters. And if you love Dr. Winters as much as I do, as much as we do, you can catch him every Thursday evening, 9 p.m. BST time, British summertime, via Dr. Rev's YouTube channel. That's Rev Dr. Philippe Shock's Matthew's YouTube channel. There He has, and if you go there at any time, actually, you can find probably about 100 videos by now that our beloved Dr. Winters has done. It's phenomenal. Dr. Winters, every strong, some say read, he comes with a new topic, well-researched topic, and he presents it via a series of presentations on Dr. Rev Philippe Schock's platform. Absolutely phenomenal. So you can catch the both of them in action there, and we got a little bit of a taster of them in action on the Zoom today. So to everyone who's joined us on the Zoom, to everyone that's joined us via YouTube, thank you so much. Let me hand over to our special guest, Dr. Philippe Schock, for some final closing remarks.
Oh, thank you for that, my beloved. So next week, we're going to go into part 2 of race technology. We're going to go into the science of memetics, the science that moves the race technology. How has whiteness, white supremacy been able to be around and regenerate itself over and over again? What are the scientific mechanisms for that to happen? So we're going to go into the science of how to create memeplexes and how to interrupt signals. It's going to be absolutely fascinating. So I appreciate you, Goddess Shanice, for having me on it. Well, I remember having a conversation with you when I put the paper out, and you said, "Oh, I want you to come on and talk about this on the show." I was like, "Hey, whenever you want to do it, we schedule it. Here we are. This is our first one. Next week, same bat place, same bat channel for part 2. I got to get my PowerPoint together." I was like, "Oh God, I forgot." That's okay. You know me. I got content. I got bars. I got bars and bars. So that's not the issue. It's curating the content, not the content itself. But I want the family to know that, again, nothing is wrong with you. Something happened to you. Nothing is wrong with our people. Something happened to our people, and it's still happening. My job, my goal, my agenda that's not hidden is to figure out how to interrupt that, how to reverse engineer what has been done to us so that it will not be done again. And we will be able to save many, many lives that we will never meet because we're saving our ancestors yet to be born. So with that being said, I just like to end with our affirmation of power. And by simply saying, I am one with first frequency.
And we'll all say together after Dr. Rev Schock, you can undo your mute buttons. Everybody on Zoom, you can unmute yourself now, please, as we do the affirmation and as we follow Dr. Rev Schock. Over to you, Dr. Rev, for the affirmation.
Sure.
Please.
I am one with first frequency.
I am one
on the first frequency.
I am one with the first thought idea.
I am one with the
first board idea.
I am one with the firstborn people.
I am
one with the firstborn people.
I am one with the only one.
I am one with the only one.
Ashe.
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 So it is.
Thank you so much.
See you on November 16th. See you in the cloud.
See you next time, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, family.
To everyone that's
family.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you, Rev.